Hello students, welcome to the present segment. As I had already told you, this would be on Ode to the West Wind, a poem which was composed by Shelley in autumn 1819. We even know the date of composition. It was the 25th of October of 1819. He was in Florence in Italy at that point, and it was a windy day on which he actually stayed indoors and wrote this poem. We'll come to the technical qualities of the poem later. It is an ode, and I have already, while doing Keats with you, I had already defined what is meant by ode proper. But it can also be taken as a kind of a short sonnet cycle, a short sonnet sequence, because each of the stanzas over there are 14 line stanzas, and they are written in what is normally called terza rima. Terza rima is a rhyme pattern that Dante follows in Divina Commedia. We'll come to these technical details at the end of our reading of the poem. This is perhaps the most representative of Shelley's poems. And let's do a little bit of contextual study before actually entering the text. The poem is often taken to be kind of an extended metaphor for the politicized tyranny of Christianity in Europe. I have already told you about how Shelley was deeply against both the hegemony of religion as well as dictatorship of any kind, tyranny of any kind. So in this poem, it's very difficult to specifically boil down on what particular aspect does he address the poem, but still, politically it can be read as a poem of revolution, a poem which is reacting against the social operations that were going on in contemporary Europe. I've already given you some idea about the world in which Shelley lived and wrote in the introductory lecture to Shelley, as also in Ozymandias. So this world is not much different from that world because it is written roughly the same time as Ozymandias was written. There was the aggression of the British monarch. There was the speculation that the Duke of Wellington would become the British Prime Minister, and in England would therefore turn into a kind of a military state. And there were also others, and added with it was one particular incident called Peterloo Massacre, which happened on the 16th of August 1819 in a peaceful congregation of 60,000 civilians. Cavalry charge fired upon, and 15 men were killed, and as many as 600 civilians were injured in it. So this was a political event of oppression, an event of political suppression that somehow was perhaps instrumental in Shelley's attitude in this poem. He was a revolutionary right from the outset. As you know, he was banned from Oxford for writing The Necessity of Atheism, and I have dealt in detail about it while I was introducing Shelley. So it's not very unlikely that he would be reacting in a very major way to Peterloo Massacre. But the reaction that you most often find in history is physical reaction or a direct involvement. There is one thing that you always have to remember about Shelley. It is that he is a poet who believes in the power of poetry to bring about revolutionary change. Now, this is not very common among both politicians and poets. We can think of Milton, who actually was a literary person, but he actually entered politics. But for Shelley, poetry, or in a broader way, literature or art, has the power to change the world. So his way of reacting to the Peterloo massacre was perhaps this. Now, there is also a personal context in this. His son William died in June 1819, and in the previous year his infant daughter also died. So perhaps William's death was a major reason behind the aura of self-pity that you find particularly towards the end of the poem. The poem consists of 5 stanzas. Each of them can be called 5 cantos, or each of them can be called cantos. And we will come to the structure later, but let's start the poem right now. I will read each of these cantos, and then we will do a kind of intensive reading between the lines. Ode to the West Wind. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's pain, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes. O thou who chariotest to the dark wintry bed the winged seed, where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thy azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion over the dreaming earth, and fill driving sweet birds like flocks to feed in air, with living hues and odors plain and hill, wild spirit, wishard moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, here, oh here. Well, if you read the first stanza or the first canto, what particularly strikes you, if the first canto is taken in isolation, is the power of the west wind, its wildness over here, and particularly its effect on natural objects like the leaves. It's autumn, and you know most of England and Italy as well is full of deciduous trees, trees which shed its leaves in the autumn. And Shelley is fully employing the idea of trees shedding their leaves with the power of the west wind to scatter them and to regerminate vegetation in the way a revolution comes, scatters everything and regerminates the good. Let's go line by line. Oh, wild west wind, do you find anything significant? West wind is the name of a particular wind. It is the autumnal wind that Shelley is talking about, but it is also the spring wind, because in Italy, the spring wind blows from the west. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being. Do you find anything significant in line 1? Wild west wind. So it's wild is entirely capitalized. Isn't it very significant? As if to suggest that it is this element of, just a minute. It is this element of the west wind that is being stressed in this first stanza. By capitalizing wild over there, he suggests that the west wind is untamed, it is uncontrolled. Control is a very negative word for Shelley, and it is unsuppressed. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's bay. Now, how do you know that we live? How do you know that we exist? By our breath. I can get the inkling about the existence of autumn from you, who is breathing through autumn. Okay, that's the idea. So you add life and existence to autumn. It goes a little further. In fact, if you consider the ending of the play, ending of the poem, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? It is you who make autumn enjoyable. It's you who make autumn tolerable, so to say. Autumn becomes meaningful because of you. Okay? Thou from whose unseen presence. In the very next line, he makes the west wind spiritual. And the interplay of the physical and the spiritual would be a very important element in this poem. Thou from whose unseen presence you can see, he is spiritualizing it. The leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing, as if the ghosts have come and congregated at an enchanter and they are going away, they are fleeing, like the leaves are, the dead leaves are driven by you in such a manner. Now why? There is a reference to the spirit, unseen presence. Again there is a reference to the ghosts, which is again a reference to something which is non-physical. What does it do? What do ghosts suggest over here? Ghosts are formed through death. So it pushes away death like the ghosts. Okay? And what are these leaves? Yellow and black and pale and hectigrate, pestilence-stricken multitudes. You know, the very phrase taken in isolation, pestilence-stricken multitudes, would very much remind of our own corona-infested world. Yellow and black and pale and hectigrate. So this is somehow, critics have pointed out, these are symptoms of plague, which was very predominant in England right from the 16th century through the 18th and the 19th. This is the early 19th century. And some critics have also pointed out that these are symptoms of tuberculotic fever rather. Anyway, yellow and black and pale and hectigrate, descriptive of the leaves over here, are somehow the next word, pestilence, or the next compound, pestilence-stricken multitude. Pestilence-stricken reminds us of fever. O thou who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seed. All these ideas, the ghost, the darkness, the winter, the wintry bed, all these somehow bring about the idea of death, but the winged seed, you carry the seeds which almost have, as it appears, wings, because they can almost move in the wind. You give mobility to the seeds. Where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion, etc. We'll stop here. Wintry bed, the winged seeds. Over here at this comma we'll stop rather, because we don't have a full stop nearby. And in the next segment we'll see what the west wind does to the seeds, the yellow, black and pale and hectic red pestilence stricken multitudes. That's all with this particular video segment. We have to keep it small so that it's easier for you to download. We'll go for the next segment, and over there we'll carry on with this poem again. Thank you.